Well, it was a team decision. I mean, we were looking at a number of areas, and I think one of the reasons there were a number of people within the team that was an area of interest, myself included, and actually also in terms of the referrals that come through, we quite a significant proportion are actually around domestic violence.
From my experience as a team member, there were a lot of cases coming on with, domestic violence issues, and I thought that was a good idea to explore that further and see how best we could support families experiencing, domestic violence.
It's looking at something that we were all interested in, that we could all take part in, looking at finding something that we could then research into further. That's part of our day-to-day work.
What we were wanting to do was to look at, one, increasing our knowledge base in terms of research and so on, but also about service delivery and development of services that we actually provide. Because I think we had a view that we could do better in terms of how we support families who experience domestic violence.
I think it's quite a tricky subject. I mean, it covers a vast area, so I think it is quite very, very interesting. And I don't think it's quite difficult to collect information on that subject, because of every family's different, and then you've got to take into aspect the cultures as well.
What everything is saying, I agree how important it is, but
I think the next step was clearly to then try and break that down into a number of areas. But the first thing we felt was key to do was to do a literature search. And so each team member they were given a different area to go and research. So maybe accessing information from the internet, looking at books, someone looking at articles. So everyone had a task.
We had some information already, sort of library resources that we would use, and obviously information from the police in terms of what information they had and how they responded to domestic violence as well. So it was obviously a collation that everybody was involved in collating bits and pieces of information which we could then piece together and then think about how we would formulate the referral and assessment team responding to incidents of domestic violence and how we would then go on and support families.
I did a lot of reading on the subject as well, and I was mainly, concerned with the impact of domestic violence, on children.
I've worked with children from different cultures and how they've accessed we've done like life story work around domestic violence, and we've also done worksheets which I found it differed from each child from different cultures. It depended on their age and how they was able to access it, so that was really interesting.
When you get your assessment,
there was a chance when I'd gone to see a child and we were doing role play scenario with domestic violence, and they automatically turned around and became the parent, and they became very violent because we were working on how they felt rather than the parent sort of like being aggressive towards them or how they saw their parents, and they turned around and became it. You could see the power in their face. It was quite shocking and frightening.
It was very exciting, I think, because we were all keyed up and we were all geared up for it. But I think, once people went out and started to kind of gather information, one about the kind of wealth of information available and actually the sheer volume, and it's about, well, how do we decide, the bit about what's good research, the bits that might be best for us in terms of usage and so on, and actually having gathered all that material, where were we going to go with it? Because at that stage it was still very broad, it was very general. We hadn't really started to break it down to become much more specific.
With domestic violence, it's as broad as long as a piece of string. There are many aspects of how it affects different people and how it affects different families, from the tiniest of babies to unborn babies to older children who may in fact even be over 18. But as a family unit that we're working with, because even though we work with children, we work with families as well. So we have not only the issues for the children that we have to consider primarily, but also their carers as well.
Lots of other factors intervene in terms of the day-to-day work, but I think we got as far as doing that bit of it, and people had actually gathered their research materials, completed their tasks, and I think we just we got bogged down really about where to go next and what to do with the material. So I have to say, consequently, in terms of developing that and taking it, you know, as far as we would like, it didn't progress from that point. So that you actually can get...
The benefits were great and will continue, because obviously once you found material that you may not have been aware of before, or support services for people who are suffering from domestic violence or children who have witnessed domestic violence, you've then accessed that one piece of information that you may have accessed you didn't know about, was a benefit, a huge benefit.
We had a card made up with the 10 most important things that research tells us about domestic violence, which we do carry around with us when we complete the work. And certainly for me, I've learned a lot more about domestic violence and how it affects children and families.
It gives us a general picture of what to look for. It's like, you know, you go out there, you open your eyes. It's like an open system, you know. And then when you go out there to do your assessment, what you get can be different, but the evidence, you know, sort of guides you onto what to look at, and it can be proved or disproved, because each family is different and people experience, you know, things differently, and you need to, you know, to be open even when using evidence-based, you know, practice, because no two families are the same. It's like mathematical, but it just gives us an idea of how things may happen.
It confirmed for us the importance of evidence in our work. And I think one of the things that we don't do very well is to say, from my observations, in my opinion, this is because, and then to say, and, you know, and this is evidence again by, you know, research. And research tells us, because I think that's actually just really important that we're constantly referring back, because we're showing also that we're being reflective, we're thinking about, you know, the work that we're doing.